The sky has always been a canvas for human wonder, but now and then something crosses it that unsettles the very core of certainty. In the quiet sweep of 2024, when astronomers looked toward the heavens through instruments sharpened to catch the faintest signatures of moving light, a whisper emerged from the deep. An interstellar body had slipped into our solar system, not born of the sun, not bound by its gravity, and not loyal to any orbit we could predict. It was named 3I, Atlas, the third such object in all of human history to arrive from beyond. But unlike the distant twinkle of stars that remain fixed in their celestial choir, this body moved drifting not with the rhythm of natural order, but as if carried by some hidden intention. To the naked eye it was nothing, a speck smaller than dust against the black canvas of space. Yet within that anonymity lay a profound unease. Oumuamua had been the first a sliver of rock or sail that tumbled like a messenger across the void. Borisov followed, a cometary blaze whose icy gases screamed of alien origin. Now came Atlas, a third in this strange procession, and humanity was forced to ask, why us? Why now? Why here? The mind leapt instantly to metaphor. Imagine walking across a desert and finding a footprint. Then, weeks later, another footprint appears from a different direction. And now, a third, impossibly placed, as if some intelligence has been circling you unseen. Atlas became that third print in the sand of the cosmos. What was it? A shard of cosmic debris cast out by chance? Or something far stranger an eye that does not blink, drifting silently through the corridors of our solar system? Its mere presence pulled the imagination into uneasy territory, where science and speculation dissolve into one another. It was small, unassuming, and yet it carried the weight of a question no telescope could answer outright. Was this object simply passing through, or was it here to study us? The question was no longer idle wonder. In the stillness of that discovery, astronomers felt the stirring of something larger, a recognition that the universe had begun to send visitors with growing regularity, as if knocking upon the fragile door of our planetary home. Atlas was not only a body of ice and stone, it was a story waiting to be told, a mystery demanding to be unraveled. And so, beneath the infinite canopy, a new chapter in humanity's confrontation with the cosmos began. The story of 3I, Atlas, did not begin with grand proclamations, nor with the booming voice of revelation. It began quietly, through the eyes of a machine that never sleeps. The Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, or ATLAS, was designed not for myth-making but for survival. An array of robotic telescopes stationed across Hawaii and South Africa, tasked with detecting potentially dangerous near-Earth objects before they could strike. It was a sentinel, programmed to notice faint blips of light against a black ocean of stars, each one an echo of rock and dust moving across cosmic distances. On the night of February 2024, one of Atlas's telescopes captured such a blip. At first glance, it was nothing unusual, just another dot sliding across the sky, no different from countless asteroids that brushed past Earth each year. Yet, as astronomers plotted its trajectory, the data began to sing a stranger tune. The arc of its path was not tied to the sun in any familiar manner. It was not looping back like a comet, nor cruising in the quiet order of an asteroid. Instead, the path bent in such a way that only one conclusion emerged. This was an interstellar traveler. For those who watched the numbers unfold, there was a moment of recognition, echoing the same feeling first felt in 2017 with Oumuamua. Another object, again slipping into our system from the abyss between stars. The first reports went out to the Minor Planet Center, the clearinghouse of celestial discoveries, where amateur and professional astronomers alike converged to confirm or deny the strange. Confirmation came swiftly. The designation was granted, 3I, Atlas, the third interstellar object ever observed by humanity. The scientists who manned the survey had not set out to uncover cosmic secrets. Their mission was defensive, to guard Earth against impact. And yet, like guards who glimpse a phantom beyond the walls, they had stumbled into something more mysterious, more unsettling. The discovery raised questions before anyone had even fully seen the body itself. Why so soon? Why now? For billions of years, interstellar wanderers must have crossed through the solar system unseen. Yet only in the last decade had human eyes begun to notice them. First Oumuamua, then Borisov, and now Atlas. Was this a coincidence of technology, or something else entirely? The first astronomers to process the images spoke in hushed tones, aware of the weight of history behind what they had caught. They plotted brightness curves, tracked its motion, and relayed coordinates to observatories worldwide. The news rippled through the community, carried by digital whispers and late-night calls. A third visitor was among us. Names began to attach themselves to the story. Observers who logged the first detections, analysts who crunched orbital equations, astronomers who turned larger instruments toward the faint streak in the sky. Each name joined a lineage that stretched back centuries to Galileo, who first lifted a telescope, to Herschel, who mapped the stars, to Hubble, who revealed the universe's expansion. Each discovery added a new stone to the great cathedral of human understanding, but Atlas was no ordinary stone. It was a shard from another cathedral entirely, one built in a star system far away. In the months following its discovery, telescopes across the globe tracked the object. Data streamed in from Hawaii, Chile, Spain, and South Africa. Each dataset added clarity, but also deepened the enigma. Observers began to sense what had unsettled them with Oumuamua, the faint impression that this was not merely a random fragment of cosmic debris. There was a geometry to its arrival, a strangeness in its speed, a silence in its composition that did not fit. It had been discovered by a machine, confirmed by human eyes, and now it lay before the collective imagination of Earth. A small, drifting traveler from the stars, carrying within its anonymous glow the possibility that the cosmos had noticed us at last. At first, the celestial drift of 3i, Atlas, appeared benign, another anonymous traveler, moving on a course that would soon carry it away. But then, as astronomers plotted its orbit with greater precision, unease began to gather. The lines drawn on the star maps bent differently than expected. The object was not chained to the gravity of our Sun in any conventional sense. Its path was hyperbolic, a curve born of origins outside our solar system, and its motion suggested something far more profound than a passing stone. To understand why this troubled scientists, one must consider the rhythm of the cosmos. Asteroids obey the mechanics of Newton, comets flourish in icy arcs, planets dance in predictable ellipses. Every object near the Sun tells a story of its birth, of where it belongs. But Atlas did not belong. It cut across those orbits with the indifference of a stranger who knows no local customs. Its incoming trajectory, when extended backward through simulations, did not point to any nearby star system with clarity. It was as though it had emerged from nowhere, a ghost carried on the wind of interstellar space. And more unsettling still, its velocity seemed oddly tuned, neither reckless nor random, but balanced at just the threshold that allowed it to weave into our planetary neighborhood before slipping back out. Scientists noted this with caution, aware of the dangers of anthropomorphizing. Yet in the quiet halls of observatories, questions grew bolder. Was this coincidence, or had something chosen this path deliberately? The anomaly deepened as brightness readings came in. Atlas reflected light in a manner that confounded simple categorization. It was not shining like the icy veil of Borisov, nor as darkly muted as typical asteroids. Instead, it flickered with subtle irregularity, as if its surface bore facets unknown. Some suggested tumbling motion, others speculated composition, rich in unusual ices or metals. But each hypothesis led back to the same unease: it did not match the familiar catalogue. Publicly, astronomers remained cautious. The official bulletins spoke of an interstellar object, a rare but natural phenomenon. Privately, they felt the weight of history pressing in. With Oumuamua, there had been whispers of alien technology. With Borisov, those whispers had quieted under the evidence of a comet. But now, with Atlas, the murmurs returned, more insistent. 3 visitors in less than a decade, after billions of silent years. A pattern was forming, one that no statistical comfort could easily explain. It was here that the tension between science and imagination reached its sharpest edge. Could nature truly scatter such emissaries toward us in such rapid succession, or was something orchestrating their arrival? The anomaly was not simply in the numbers, but in the silence they carried. No radio signature, no cometary tail, no ordinary mark of belonging. Just a foreign traveler gliding through our solar system, indifferent yet impossibly intriguing, as though performing an act for an unseen audience. For scientists, this was the essence of the shock. An object that should not have been noticed, now noticed. A body that should not have mattered, now mattering profoundly. And as Atlas crept along its arc, the mystery of intent, the human compulsion to ask not only what it is, but why it is here, spread from the astronomical community to the broader imagination of humankind. Long before Atlas unsettled the minds of astronomers, the memory of a predecessor still lingered like an unsolved riddle. In late 2017, humanity had been caught unprepared when a slender shard named Oumuamua streaked through the solar system. It had come without warning, its hyperbolic trajectory revealing its interstellar nature only after it had already swung past the sun and was retreating into darkness. For scientists, it was a shock akin to finding a message in a bottle, except the bottle had been flung from an ocean whose shores were light years away. Oumuamua behaved in ways that rattled confidence. Its shape appeared elongated, perhaps a cigar, perhaps a pancake, its light curves shifting with an irregularity that suggested a geometry alien to known celestial bodies. It accelerated as it departed, but not in the manner of a comet propelled by jets of gas. Instead, its motion seemed to whisper of some unseen force, something that gnawed at the edge of Newtonian and Einsteinian expectations. Theories multiplied: an icy fragment hidden by a crust, an exotic hydrogen iceberg, even a wafer-thin light sail designed to ride the gentle pressure of starlight. No answer satisfied completely. And as debate swirled, a more unsettling truth emerged. Oumuamua had been invisible until it was almost gone. Humanity had glimpsed a stranger at its door only as it turned away, leaving more questions than data. Just 2 years later, in 2019, a second traveler arrived. 2I, Borisov. Unlike Oumuamua, Borisov revealed its nature more readily. It sported a tail, glowing with vaporized ices, confirming it as a comet from another star system. While extraordinary, Borisov fit more comfortably into the natural order. It reassured many that interstellar visitors were not necessarily omens of design, but simply fragments of distant systems cast adrift. Yet when Atlas appeared in 2024, it reopened the wound left by Oumuamua. Here was another body that defied easy classification, another puzzle piece that seemed carved to not quite fit. It did not blaze like Borisov, nor did it fade as quickly as Oumuamua. Instead, it hovered in the uneasy middle, carrying traits of both and yet belonging to neither. The comparison was inevitable. Scientists revisited old papers, running simulations anew, asking if Atlas was kin to Oumuamua, if both might represent a class of objects that slipped through the galaxy with properties unfamiliar to terrestrial understanding. Could they be fragments of shattered worlds, or the technological relics of civilizations long gone? The echo of Oumuamua was more than scientific, it was psychological. That first interstellar visitor had awakened something ancient in the human mind. The fear of being watched, the thrill of contact, the dread of insignificance. Atlas, arriving as the third visitor, stirred that echo into a chorus. 3 times now, the cosmos had tapped on our window, and each tap grew louder. It was no longer just a matter of discovery. It was a matter of recognition. Humanity had been noticed, or at least it felt that way. Oumuamua had asked the question. Borisov had softened the blow. Atlas had returned the tension with greater weight. And so, as telescopes traced its passage, Atlas was never seen in isolation. It was always framed in the shadow of those earlier encounters, as if the universe were telling a story in installments, and this was only the latest chapter. The name Atlas carries with it a quiet irony. The asteroid terrestrial impact last alert system, a robotic sentinel built to protect Earth, was never intended to gaze into the deep interstellar sea. Its duty was local, watching for killers of worlds, for tumbling rocks that might one day descend unseen upon our planet. It was a watchman with narrow orders, yet fate has a way of bending machines toward mysteries they were not designed to unravel. On that February night in 2024, Atlas's software flagged what seemed, at first, unremarkable. Just another moving point of light, catalogued and cross-checked. But as its observations were stitched together over hours, the trajectory curved into strangeness. Analysts working late traced the lines and saw the impossible, a path that could not be explained by our sun's ancient family. This was no asteroid from the main belt, no wandering comet from the Oort cloud. This was a stranger, foreign-born, interstellar. The astronomers who tended Atlas found themselves repeating the same ritual of disbelief that had greeted Oumuamua and Borisov. First denial, then recalculation, then a tightening silence as the reality set in. Humanity's third interstellar object had been found, not by chance, but by a machine devoted to planetary defense. And so, a system meant to protect us from death, from above, had instead introduced us to something more enigmatic, a traveler from beyond the stars. The Atlas survey system itself became part of the story. Built with wide-field lenses and relentless cadence, it swept the skies for the faintest signs of motion. Its twin facilities, one in Hawaii, one in South Africa, allowed near-continuous coverage of both hemispheres. Day by day, night by night, they recorded streaks of light, most destined for obscurity. But in its patient vigilance, Atlas caught a jewel that was not meant to be found. For the public, the announcement of 3I, Atlas, was almost dreamlike. A third interstellar body, discovered by a network named after a titan condemned to carry the heavens. The symbolism was irresistible. Atlas, the mythic figure, bore the weight of the sky, and Atlas, the telescope, bore the burden of revealing what lay beyond it. And yet, within the scientific community, the discovery was met with an undercurrent of unease. These systems were supposed to be predictable. Asteroids, comets, fragments of planetary birth. The interstellar arrivals were supposed to be rare beyond comprehension, and still, here they were 3 in less than a decade. In emails, conference calls, and late-night data sessions, astronomers compared notes. They checked instrument calibrations, retraced observational errors, asked if perhaps their models of galactic dynamics had underestimated the frequency of visitors. But the answers did not comfort. The data was sound, the orbit was true, the object was real. The discovery of Atlas was not merely another entry in the logbooks of celestial cataloguing. It was a fracture in the narrative of probability, a tremor that suggested the universe might not be as indifferent as once thought. Machines had done their duty. but what they revealed was larger than duty. 3I, Atlas had arrived, not like the countless stones before it, but like a messenger without a message, an enigma illuminated by instruments, yet unanswered by understanding. Once the orbit of 3I, Atlas, was firmly charted, astronomers leaned closer into its mathematics. They expected an explanation to emerge, something mundane, perhaps an icy fragment that had drifted too far from its parent star, perhaps a relic thrown outward in a violent planetary birth. But the numbers betrayed them. The trajectory was not the smooth signature of an asteroid belonging to our Sun, nor the expansive sweep of a comet dragged in by gravity. Instead, its path curved on a hyperbolic escape, a geometry that marked it as something alien to our system. In celestial mechanics, such a path is extraordinary. Most objects we observe are closed orbits, looping endlessly in ellipses. To escape requires a velocity that severs the tether to the Sun, a speed so great that the object will never return. Atlas carried precisely that kind of motion. It did not belong. It would pass through once and vanish again into the endless dark. But even in this, anomalies lurked. Its incoming velocity was suspiciously low enough that it barely crossed the line into interstellar visitor status, as though tuned to pass near us rather than race recklessly by. Oumuamua had shared this peculiarity, an arrival speed that seemed improbably close to the galactic average, almost as though it had been placed here intentionally. With Atlas, that coincidence returned, and scientists found themselves staring at equations that whispered of design. The absence of familiar cometary behavior compounded the strangeness. No luminous tail followed. No jets of vapor could explain its acceleration. Its silence defied expectations. To many, this silence felt less like absence and more like withholding, as if something had been deliberately hidden. Computer models tried to soothe the disquiet. Perhaps Atlas was coated in dark carbonaceous compounds, reducing sublimation. Perhaps it carried exotic ices invisible to our instruments. Yet every perhaps left more questions than answers. The hyperbolic orbit, the velocity, the lack of ordinary emission all stacked together like a riddle carved into mathematics itself. And then came the comparisons. Scientists placed Atlas alongside its predecessors. Borisov had been cometary, explicable, a natural emissary. Oumuamua had been mysterious, elusive, provocative. Atlas now stood uneasily between them, strange enough to challenge understanding, restrained enough to deny certainty. It was as if the cosmos had dealt humanity a sequence of puzzles, each one incrementally designed to test the boundaries of interpretation. The orbital rules of the solar system are not easily defied. Gravity is unrelenting, and chance scatterings of objects are expected to obey the indifferent laws of celestial mechanics. Yet here was Atlas, moving with the quiet assurance of something that seemed aware of its course. Astronomers resisted such anthropomorphic thoughts, but the question would not be silenced. Was this path natural chance, or a line drawn by intent? The heavens had revealed another visitor. Its orbit was the clue, its silence, the message. And in that silence, humanity heard not comfort, but the faint suggestion that the rules might not belong entirely to us. When probability entered the discussion, the sense of unease sharpened. For most of human history, the idea of witnessing even a single interstellar object within a lifetime seemed vanishingly remote. Our telescopes had scanned the skies for centuries without detecting one. Astronomers calculated that such travelers should sweep through the solar system perhaps once every 100,000 years, slipping by unnoticed in the immensity of space. By those odds, Oumuamua in 2017 should have been a once-in-many-generations event. And yet, less than 2 years later, Borisov blazed across our vision, unmistakably a comet from another star. Statisticians were forced to recalculate. The numbers strained under the weight of coincidence. Was it possible that interstellar visitors were far more common than once believed, their paths hidden only by our lack of modern instruments? Or was there something else at play? Then came 3I, Atlas, just 5 years later, and the calculations began to feel absurd. 3 visitors in less than a decade, when our models had predicted near silence. It was as though the universe had suddenly turned its gaze upon us. Probability, once a comforting guide, now taunted astronomers with its defiance. Some sought refuge in new estimates. Perhaps planetary systems shed debris more frequently than thought. Perhaps ejection from forming worlds was common, and our galaxy was filled with invisible shards wandering between suns. The Vera Rubin Observatory, not yet fully awake, was expected to reveal thousands more in the coming decades. But even these explanations could not erase the strangeness of timing. Why should humanity, only now sharpening its telescopic vision, suddenly be greeted with 3 such encounters in rapid succession? It was not just the frequency, it was the symbolism. Oumuamua, silent, angular, enigmatic. Borisov, bright, cometary, more ordinary. Atlas, poised again on the edge of anomaly. The sequence seemed staged, like a pattern meant to unfold in steps. To some, this was coincidence painted with human imagination. To others, it was the beginning of a story told across cosmic scales, one in which we were not the narrators but the subjects. The weight of probability bent beneath the question, if these visitors are natural, why do they feel deliberate? Why does their timing echo the rhythm of a knock upon the door, not once but 3 times? In observatories and conference halls, statisticians scribbled distributions across chalkboards, while philosophers wrote essays on cosmic attention. But beneath both lay the same tremor of thought that maybe chance was not the whole truth. Maybe, in the immense silence of space, these arrivals carried the faint outline of intention. The question of origin clung to 3I, Atlas like a shadow. Where could such a body have come from? Every interstellar object must be born of violence, flung outward from the embrace of its parent star. Planetary systems are not gentle nurseries. They are arenas of collision, where worlds are sculpted by impacts, and gravity is both sculptor and executioner. In the turmoil of creation, fragments are often hurled into the cold between suns, condemned to wander for eternity. For many astronomers, this was the simplest answer. Atlas was debris. A shard chipped away during some ancient planetary birth, cast off into the galactic tide. If so, it was one of countless billions drifting unseen in the void. Its presence here, then, would be mere accident. Yet the simplicity of that explanation did not dissolve the unease. Atlas's velocity was curiously tuned, not the reckless slingshot of chaotic ejection, but a measured passage through the solar system. Its trajectory, when traced backward, pointed nowhere in particular, not to a nearby star, not even to a plausible stellar nursery. The cosmos had billions of potential sources, yet none claimed it. It was as though it had emerged from the darkness itself, originless. Other theories grew bolder. Some speculated Atlas might be a fragment from the same unknown system that produced Oumuamua. Could they share a birthplace? If so, what kind of star, what kind of violence, could yield such enigmatic bodies? Still, others wondered if it might be more than fragmentary chance. Was Atlas a construct, a vessel shaped to endure interstellar transit? Was it flung not by blind gravity, but by deliberate hands or minds we could scarcely imagine? The history of human thought is filled with mirrors, and Atlas became one. We thought of Voyager and Pioneer, spacecraft we ourselves had cast into the galactic night. Each bore plaques and golden records, messages carved in the hope that some distant intelligence might one day notice them. What if Atlas was another civilization's echo of that impulse? A drifting eye, a wandering emissary, carrying neither plaque nor message, but presence alone. Even within the realm of natural explanation, origin remained slippery. Computer simulations suggested it might have crossed light years without perturbation, surviving interstellar dust and magnetic fields to arrive intact. Such resilience begged questions about composition. What kind of matter could endure such exile, polished smooth by eons of silent travel? As theories multiplied, one fact remained immovable. Atlas did not belong here. It came from outside the boundaries of our solar hearth, carrying with it the silence of another place we could not name. Its origin remained a cipher, a blank space on the map of the galaxy. And in that blankness, the human mind did what it always does. It imagined. A shard of a shattered world, a relic of alien engineering, a pilgrim wandering with purpose. Each possibility revealed less about Atlas itself and more about our hunger to know whether we are alone. The first weeks of observation brought forth a growing collection of numbers, brightness curves, spectra, velocity measurements, and yet, instead of clarifying, they deepened the strangeness of 3I, Atlas. Its light told stories that contradicted one another. At times, it gleamed with an albedo too high for an ordinary asteroid, as though some surfaces reflected the sun with unusual efficiency. At other times, the brightness dipped unpredictably, hinting at rotation or at facets that caught light unevenly. What was it made of? Ice, rock, metals, something more exotic? No answer fit cleanly. When Oumuamua had puzzled scientists in 2017, its erratic brightness led to endless speculation: elongated shard, flattened pancake, tumbling slab. Atlas offered a similar riddle, but subtler, as if aware of our scrutiny. Its reflectivity did not align with simple cometary ice, nor with the dark, carbon-rich surfaces of most asteroids. Some suggested it was coated in a thin layer of exotic frost, perhaps nitrogen ice like Pluto's surface, polished by eons in interstellar space. Others argued it could be metallic, a shard of some planetary core, and a more daring few whispered of artificiality of materials crafted, not born. Adding to the unease, Atlas failed to display the usual cometary behavior. No tail streamed behind it, no halo of sublimating gases betrayed its presence. Comets heat and shed as they near the sun, yet Atlas glided in silence. Spectrographs strained for signs of water vapor, carbon monoxide, dust, any fingerprint of ordinary activity, but found only ambiguity. It was an object that refused to confess its nature. The brightness anomalies drew comparisons to mirrors. Could its surfaces be smooth in ways that nature rarely produces? Could we be glimpsing panels, plates, or sails battered by time? The suggestion was not stated openly in journals, but in conversations after conferences, late-night exchanges between astronomers, the word artificial lingered like smoke. Even if wholly natural, its irregularity demanded explanation. Tumbling rotation was possible, yet the data hinted at something more complex than random spin. Its light seemed to pulse, almost rhythmically, as though some hidden geometry was revealed only at intervals. These subtle deviations may have seemed small, but to astronomers trained in precision, they were thunderclaps. The universe is vast, but its rules are steady. A comet behaves like a comet. An asteroid behaves like an asteroid. But Atlas belonged to neither category comfortably. It floated between definitions, a body both familiar and alien, an object whose refusal to be catalogued felt like intention itself. And in the growing dossier of its properties, its reflectivity, its silence, its flickering light curves, there emerged not answers, but an unsettling portrait. a traveler that looked back at us with the inscrutability of a question mark carved into the dark. As the strangeness of 3I, Atlas settled over the scientific community, attention turned not only to its path and brightness, but to the possibility of communication. The idea was not unprecedented. In 2017, when Oumuamua stunned astronomers with its anomalous acceleration, the Breakthrough Listen project had turned the great radio dishes of the world toward it, sweeping across frequencies in search of any artificial signal. They had found only silence, but the gesture itself had marked a turning point. Humanity had dared to ask if a rock drifting through the solar system might not be a rock at all. With Atlas, the question returned, heavier than before. If this was not mere debris, what if it was an emissary? And if emissary, then might it speak? Radio telescopes in the United States, Europe, and China tuned their ears to the object. Dishes turned under cold skies, scanning bands from the familiar to the exotic, searching for patterns too precise to be natural. Every whisper of interference, every spike in frequency, was cross-checked and tested. The results, as before, were silence. No beacon pulsed from Atlas, no encoded rhythm of artificial design. Yet even silence carried meaning. Silence did not prove absence. It proved only that if communication existed, it was not meant for us, or not meant in ways we understood. Some scientists argued that the act of listening itself was a milestone, that to even suspect such intent revealed how much the human perspective had shifted since Oumuamua. Others speculated more radically. What if Atlas itself was the message? What if its very presence, its arrival, and its refusal to fit categories was a form of communication, an observation tool sent to passively watch, never to signal, a drifting eye rather than a speaking mouth? If so, then the silence of the radio sky was not absence but design. This line of thought grew bolder when combined with the object's curious reflectivity and rotational quirks. Some wondered aloud whether these were not random properties but signatures of engineering reflective surfaces tuned not to shine for us, but to endure the harshness of interstellar space. If such speculation bordered on heresy in academic halls, it nevertheless threaded itself through the imagination of the public, carried in headlines and whispers. For those who held fast to natural explanations, the listening campaign was still valuable. It set limits, established thresholds, told us where not to look. Yet for those willing to entertain the unsettling, the silence itself was the most eloquent of answers. It was a silence that watched, not spoke. And so, humanity listened with its great machines, giant ears pressed against the cosmic wall, straining for a sound that did not come. In the absence of a signal, Atlas grew more enigmatic, as though it existed not to be heard, but to remind us that listening is sometimes more profound than answering. The longer astronomers stared at 3I, Atlas, the more they became troubled not by what was present, but by what was missing. For centuries, comets had been faithful storytellers. As they swung close to the sun, they bared their hearts in shimmering tales, jets of vapor, clouds of dust, plumes of carbon dioxide announcing their identity. Every comet was a confession, revealing composition and history in a flare of light. Yet Atlas kept its secrets. No tail followed, no veil of gas unfurled, no bright coma expanded to signal ordinary sublimation. This absence was not subtle. As the object approached the inner system, sensitive instruments scoured the spectrum for traces of water, vapor, methane, or other volatile compounds. They expected at least a faint haze, some molecular whisper that sunlight was prying loose. What they found instead was silence. Atlas glided through the sun's warmth with a composure that seemed almost deliberate. Oumuamua had sparked the same unease years before. Its acceleration had been explained away, in part, as outgassing too faint for telescopes to see. But here, with Atlas, even that possibility felt strained. Nothing betrayed the presence of sublimating ices. Its stillness in the face of solar heat seemed unnatural, as though it had been designed to resist exposure. This refusal to behave like a comet stirred deeper questions. Was Atlas rocky, metallic, armored beneath a shell that denied the sun entry? Or was its silence the result of age, an object so ancient that its volatiles had long since vanished into space, leaving only a barren husk? Some leaned on this explanation, noting that billions of years adrift between stars could strip any body of its icy breath. Yet others felt the absence too stark, too absolute, as though engineered rather than eroded. The unease grew when light curves suggested a reflective geometry inconsistent with rough, natural rock. Smooth surfaces reflect differently, casting glints rather than steady fades. Atlas's glimmers sometimes carried this signature, too precise to be easily dismissed. It was an object that seemed to say, "I will not reveal what you expect to see." The silence became its loudest quality. Astronomers had grown used to noise, the roaring tails of comets, the dusty trails of asteroids, the measurable signals of physical processes. Atlas denied them all. It was not loud, it was still, and in that stillness, scientists were forced to ask, was this a remnant, or was it restraint? The absence of ordinary features transformed Atlas into something extraordinary, not by what it gave, but by what it withheld. It was like a face without expression, unreadable, forcing all who gazed upon it to project meaning onto the void. And in that refusal to behave, 3I, Atlas became more than an object. It became a presence, an intruder whose silence was louder than any comet's tail. In the mathematics of celestial motion, intent is not supposed to exist. Equations govern the heavens with a cold clarity: mass, velocity, gravity, momentum. Yet when scientists charted the path of 3I, Atlas, with increasing precision, they found themselves confronted with a geometry that seemed to tease at something beyond chance. Its orbit was undeniably hyperbolic, confirming that it came from outside our solar system and would not return. But unlike the wild scatterings expected of ejected debris, Atlas moved with a subtle precision, its incoming trajectory aligned in ways that brushed uncomfortably close to Earth's orbital neighborhood, as if sketched with awareness. The numbers did not scream impossibility, they whispered improbability. And improbability is often the mother of suspicion. Computer models were run again and again, tracing Atlas backward into the galactic field, yet no plausible parent system emerged. Its path dissolved into uncertainty long before any nearby star could claim it. The cosmos is vast, and trajectories are easily perturbed over light years of travel. But the effect was uncanny. Atlas seemed to come from nowhere, following a path that was not random enough to comfort, nor clear enough to explain. Some astronomers leaned into natural explanations: galactic tides, close encounters with unseen stars, the faint tug of interstellar clouds, all could distort a body's journey. Yet the data carried a different weight, as though chance was being stretched thin. A visitor with no cometary tail, no clear origin, and a velocity curiously suited to passage near Earth. It was a sequence of anomalies that, when added together, pointed toward a pattern. In hushed conversations, comparisons were made to human design. Spacecraft launched by our species followed deliberate arcs: gravity assists, slingshot maneuvers, calculated entry and exit paths. Could Atlas, in its quiet trajectory, be echoing that same geometry of intention? Was it coincidence that its hyperbolic line passed so neatly through the solar system, or was it a corridor chosen long ago? The suspicion was not written into official papers. Academic language cloaked itself in caution, preferring terms like anomalous and unexpected. But beneath that caution, the human imagination ran freely. Equations, normally sterile, now glowed with the suggestion of purpose. Every plotted point became a footprint, every curve a line traced by an unseen hand. This was the paradox of Atlas. The mathematics did not break any known law, yet the harmony of its numbers felt almost too deliberate. Nature is often chaotic, scattered, untidy, but Atlas arrived with a precision that resembled choreography, as if the cosmos had staged an entrance. For the first time, astronomers began to sense a deeper question emerging, one that threatened to eclipse even the nature of the object itself. Was the universe speaking to us in the language of geometry? The most unsettling echo of Oumuamua returned when astronomers noticed something faint but undeniable: 3I. Atlas did not move exactly as gravity demanded. Its trajectory carried a whisper of additional acceleration, a deviation too small to dismiss, yet too persistent to ignore. In the universe, motion is law. Newton's equations describe the pull of gravity, and Einstein refines them with the fabric of space-time. Every comet and asteroid is bound to these rules, their velocities explainable by the sun's influence or by jets of gas. Yet Atlas betrayed a sliver of rebellion. Like Oumuamua before it, it seemed to drift with an extra push, as if nudged by a hand unseen. The puzzle of non-gravitational acceleration has haunted astronomers since 2017. For Oumuamua, explanations multiplied, perhaps outgassing too faint to detect, jets of vapor hidden beneath a crust. But no evidence of gases was found. Some suggested exotic hydrogen ice, sublimating invisibly. Others speculated about nitrogen fragments, slivers of alien Plutos, but each theory frayed under scrutiny. The possibility lingered that Oumuamua was something else entirely: a thin sheet, a solar sail propelled not by evaporation but by starlight itself. Atlas revived this spectre. Observations revealed subtle drifts inconsistent with pure Newtonian paths. Not dramatic, but enough to whisper the same question: what force drives it? If outgassing, why is no tail seen? If pressure from sunlight, why does its shape and reflectivity hint at engineered smoothness? If random perturbation, why does it mirror the riddle of its predecessor so closely? To the cautious, the answer lay in physics, not yet understood, perhaps a class of interstellar ices unfamiliar to us, or processes too subtle for current instruments. To the bold, the implication was harder to contain. Two objects, separated by years but united in anomaly, both showing signs of acceleration without visible cause. It strained coincidence. It suggested pattern. The very act of questioning shook the foundation of certainty. Gravity had always been the unbroken rule, the bedrock of motion. Yet here was evidence that small bodies might move otherwise, tugged by forces hidden or directed. Some theorists ventured into the strange territory of quantum fields, of vacuum interactions, of forces beyond current physics. Others whispered more daringly still, perhaps these objects were not passive, perhaps their motions were chosen. For centuries, humanity had assumed that the universe was indifferent, but Atlas, gliding with its inexplicable drift, reignited the thought that indifference might not be the only story. What if the laws were not being broken at all, only bent by intention? In its subtle defiance of motion, Atlas became more than a visitor. It became a question carved into the orbit of the stars. What moves when nothing should? The appearance of unexplained acceleration in 3I, Atlas cracked open the same door of speculation that Oumuamua once had, and through that door poured a flood of theories. Some were cautious, clinging to natural explanations. Others were bold, daring to tread into the realm of the extraordinary. The spectrum of ideas revealed as much about human imagination as it did about the object itself. The most conservative suggestion was that Atlas was nothing more than a fragment of volatile ice, its surface sealed by time, venting in ways too faint for our telescopes to detect. A nitrogen iceberg, perhaps, chipped from a Pluto-like body ejected billions of years ago. But even this theory frayed when tested. Such ices should be rare, too fragile to survive interstellar exile. Hydrogen ice was also proposed lightweight, sublimating invisibly, but its instability made its survival improbable. Then came the more radical ideas. Some researchers dusted off the hypothesis of light sails, ultra-thin structures propelled by the faint but constant pressure of starlight. Such sails were not fantasy. Humanity itself had begun to experiment with them in projects like Icaros and Lightsail 2. If we had imagined such designs, why not others? Oumuamua had once been described as a thin, flat sheet by some theorists. Atlas, with its curious brightness and absence of outgassing, seemed to echo that possibility. Could it, too, be a sail tattered, ancient, and wandering between stars? Another possibility suggested fragments of alien engineering, long-abandoned probes or derelict craft, drifting silently in the galactic current. Not emissaries alive and deliberate, but relics of civilizations gone, their machines continuing on endless paths long after their makers were dust. Atlas, in this view, was not a messenger, but a fossil, a technological ruin mistaken for stone. More speculative still were theories of self-guiding probes, von Neumann machines sent to survey the galaxy. If such constructs existed, they need not signal us, need not shine with intention. They would only pass quietly, watching. Could Atlas be one of these? Its silence not failure but strategy, a sentinel that observes without announcing, drifting exactly as designed. Even within natural frameworks, strangeness persisted. Some proposed it might be a shard of exotic matter, its density or reflectivity altering its response to solar radiation. Others wondered about quantum-scale effects, vacuum pressure, or subtle interactions with interstellar magnetic fields. Each theory stretched physics, demanding new pages for textbooks that had long seemed settled. The scientific community held its breath between caution and wonder. Official publications spoke of icy fragments and statistical anomalies, grounding speculation in the ordinary. But beneath the surface, among late-night conversations and whispered debates, the bolder theories thrived. For every explanation rooted in known physics, another rose that hinted at intelligence, intent, or lost histories written into the silence of space. In the end, the theories did not converge, they multiplied, and in their proliferation lay the deeper truth. Atlas was not just an object. It was a mirror, forcing humanity to confront the boundaries of its own imagination. Theories became reflections of what we feared and what we hoped, that we are alone or that we are not. When theories of sails, probes, and fragments of alien craft began to circulate, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in print, the conversation turned toward a humbling reflection. What of our own emissaries? Humanity had already sent its silent messengers into the abyss. Could Atlas be to another civilization what Voyager and Pioneer were to us? In the late 20th century, Earth launched objects destined never to return. Pioneer 10 and Pioneer 11, twin scouts, each carried plaques etched with symbols, a man and a woman, the silhouette of the spacecraft, the position of the sun relative to pulsars. Then came Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, grander still, each bearing the golden record, a time capsule of sounds and images, greetings in dozens of languages, the cry of a baby, the song of a whale, Bach's Brandenburg Concerto, Chuck Berry's Johnny B. Good. These spacecraft now drift beyond the heliosphere, carrying humanity's fingerprints across interstellar darkness. If another intelligence were to encounter them, what would they think? Would they see the plaques as art, as warning, as invitation? Would they mistake the spacecraft for natural debris, their antennas like broken wings? Or would they recognize intent in their geometry? Atlas, then, might be such a relic, only inverted something that we had not launched, but which had come to us. It carried no record we could detect, no plaque or disk. Its silence was its message, its geometry, its only language. Perhaps it was never meant to speak, only to endure. In this way, it mirrored Voyager, a fragment flung outward not with expectation of return, but as a seed of curiosity, a symbol of a civilization unwilling to vanish unnoticed. For many scientists, this analogy was grounding. It reminded them that human beings themselves had created artifacts that, one day, might puzzle distant astronomers. A sail drifting across another system could provoke the same debates there that Atlas sparked here. Perhaps we were not confronting the other at all. Perhaps we were glimpsing our own future reflected back. The thought was not comforting. If Atlas was indeed an artifact, then it implied timescales that dwarfed human imagination. Our Voyagers are 45 years old, already fragile, their instruments failing, but Atlas might be millions of years in transit. If it was once a probe, it was now ancient. Its makers, if they had ever lived, might already be gone, their world extinguished, their voices silenced. And yet, even as dust or ruin, such an object speaks. It says, "We were here. We looked outward. We wanted to be known." Humanity had done the same. Thus, when Atlas was framed against the memory of Voyager and Pioneer, it ceased to be only a mystery. It became a mirror, forcing us to ask if our own emissaries are drifting silently now. What will they mean to the eyes that one day find them? And when we gaze upon Atlas, what meaning are we projecting into its silence? With Atlas now firmly under scrutiny, the next step was not speculation but testing. Science thrives on tools, and humanity has been arming itself with sharper instruments than ever before. The question was simple: what could our most advanced eyes and ears reveal about this enigmatic traveler? The most immediate hopes rested on Earth's ground-based giants. The Very Large Telescope in Chile, the Keck Observatory in Hawaii, and a network of smaller facilities across the globe all turned their optics toward Atlas, gathering spectra and light curves. Yet even their vast mirrors struggled with an object so faint, so distant, so unwilling to disclose its nature. The data came in slivers, subtle hints of brightness variation, traces of possible minerals, whispers that did not resolve into a voice. But new machines stood waiting. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory, soon to begin its full-sky survey, promised to transform the field. With its ability to scan the heavens night after night, Rubin would make transient phenomena impossible to hide. Interstellar objects like Atlas could no longer slip by unnoticed. Every fragment crossing the solar system would be logged, studied, compared. Already, scientists dreamed of Rubin's data as the key to contextualizing Atlas. Was it rare or part of a larger cosmic tide? Beyond Earth, space telescopes sharpened their gaze. The James Webb Space Telescope searched in the infrared, hoping to catch the faint heat of Atlas's surface, to discern whether it was ice, rock, or something stranger. The Hubble Space Telescope, though aging, still captured valuable imagery, each pixel a clue to shape and reflectivity. Plans even stirred for pursuit. Some visionaries proposed rapid response missions probes that could chase an interstellar object within years, intercepting it before it slipped away forever. Concepts like ESA's Comet Interceptor and NASA's long-discussed Oumuamua follow-up mission were reconsidered, this time with Atlas as a candidate. Could we one day fly alongside such a visitor, measure it up close, scrape the truth from its surface? Until then, science pressed forward with the tools at hand. Radar arrays listened for echoes. Particle detectors monitored for dust trails. Algorithms crunched brightness data, hunting for periodic patterns that might betray rotation or engineered symmetry. Each effort was a fragment of a collective vigil, humanity's instruments stretched to their limits, straining to turn mystery into knowledge. But even as the tools grew sharper, Atlas resisted. Its silence remained intact, its composition uncertain, its path both precise and elusive. The very instruments that had conquered so much of the cosmos now found themselves humbled by a speck of drifting light. And yet, the pursuit itself carried meaning. To point our greatest machines toward a silent stranger was to admit that the question mattered, that whether Atlas was stone or sail, relic or ruin, its presence demanded our attention. It was not just another entry in a catalogue. It was an interrogation of our tools, our theories, and ultimately our place in the order of things. As the data accumulated, astronomers began to step back and see the broader canvas. 3 interstellar visitors in less than a decade was not just an anomaly, it was a pattern, a sequence that demanded interpretation. Oumuamua, Borisov, and now Atlas, each distinct, each mysterious, and yet linked in ways that defied easy dismissal. Oumuamua had been the enigma, a shape-shifting sliver that accelerated without explanation. Borisov, by contrast, appeared comfortingly familiar, its cometary tail blazing as if to remind us that nature can still act within known rules. Atlas arrived as the uneasy hybrid, neither as ordinary as Borisov nor as blatantly anomalous as Oumuamua. Its silence was deliberate, its features liminal, as though it straddled categories by design. Patterns matter in science. When phenomena repeat, they hint at underlying laws or processes. But here, the repetition did not clarify, it obscured. The 3 objects formed a triad that felt staged, like variations on a theme: the unreadable, the ordinary, the ambiguous. For some, this was coincidence magnified by human storytelling. For others, it was the opening bars of a larger symphony still unfolding across time. The statistics alone were unnerving. If 3 such visitors had arrived so quickly, might dozens more be passing unnoticed even now? Was the galaxy filled with silent wanderers, emissaries of chance or intention, slipping past us in the dark? The Rubin Observatory was expected to flood us with answers, perhaps hundreds of detections, but until then, each visitor carried disproportionate weight, each shaping the narrative of human contact with the interstellar void. And yet, beyond the numbers, there was an aesthetic unity to the pattern. Oumuamua had raised the question of intent. Borisov had soothed it. Atlas reopened it with greater subtlety, as though the cosmos were testing the limits of our skepticism. One stone shouted, one whispered, one remained poised between the 2. The sequence was not random, it was haunting. Scientists discussed this carefully, aware of the dangers of anthropomorphizing the heavens. Still, the parallels were irresistible. If one were to design a series of encounters meant to awaken attention, one could hardly have scripted it better. First the inexplicable, then the ordinary, then the ambiguous, leaving humanity suspended between belief and doubt. In the dark silence of space, patterns whisper louder than voices, and with the arrival of Atlas, the whisper had become a chorus. As astronomers strained to understand why Atlas behaved as it did, some minds reached beyond ordinary astrophysics into the deeper architecture of the cosmos. Could it be, they wondered, that these interstellar visitors were not merely drifting rocks, but bodies moving along hidden structures that science was only beginning to glimpse? One hypothesis invoked the mysterious scaffolding of the universe itself, dark energy, the invisible driver of cosmic expansion. Though dark energy operates at scales larger than galaxies, some theorists speculated that subtle interactions might shape the trajectories of objects passing between stars. Perhaps Atlas was not a lone fragment wandering randomly, but a traveler caught in a current, carried along invisible streams that threaded through interstellar space. Others considered the cosmic web, the filaments of matter and void that stitch the universe together. Galaxies gather along these threads like dewdrops on a spider's silk. Could smaller objects, asteroidal shards, icy relics, even crafted probes, ride along gravitational corridors shaped by this structure? In such a vision, Atlas was not merely arriving, it was flowing, borne to us by channels deeper than chance. The most speculative voices dared to tie these mysteries to human physics itself. What if interstellar visitors exposed cracks in our models of space-time? Could they be probing regions where relativity and quantum mechanics strain against one another, slipping through seams we cannot yet perceive? A body like Atlas, arriving with inexplicable velocity and acceleration, might be the first hint that the laws we trust are not absolute, but conditional rules that hold only until something crosses their threshold. Even bolder speculations merged the astrophysical with the intentional. What if these objects used dark energy itself, or quantum fields, as propulsion? If civilizations older than ours had learned to harness the vacuum to ride the tides of expansion, then visitors like Atlas could be more than wanderers. They could be navigators, using the deepest physics as sails to cross the abyss. For most astronomers, such ideas hovered at the edge of credibility, too extravagant to publish, too enticing to ignore, yet the very act of asking revealed how far Atlas had pushed human thought. What began as a faint speck of light had opened doors to the largest questions of cosmology, questions about the fabric of reality, the currents of unseen energy, the possibility that the universe itself is laced with highways invisible to human eyes. And if Atlas was indeed riding one of those highways, then its arrival was not arbitrary. It was directed by the hidden hand of the cosmos, or by something that had learned how to use that hand. Beyond the scaffolding of dark energy and the cosmic web, some scientists and philosophers turned their gaze toward the invisible sea beneath reality itself, the quantum fields that ripple through every point in space. If Atlas seemed to move with whispers of intention, could it be because it was shaped or even propelled by the rules of the quantum world, rules that ordinary celestial bodies rarely reveal? Quantum mechanics governs the smallest scales, but its influence pervades everything. Every atom, every photon, every vacuum fluctuation is part of this hidden tapestry. In the void between stars, space is not truly empty. It seethes with energy, particles popping in and out of existence, an invisible foam that hums with possibilities. Some theorists asked, what if interstellar objects like Atlas interact with this foam in ways we do not yet understand? The idea was not without precedent. Physicists had long speculated on quantum vacuum propulsion, the possibility of harnessing the fluctuations of empty space to generate motion. To our technology, this remained dreamlike, but in theory, it was possible. If a civilization older than ours had mastered it, their probes might drift without fuel, feeding off the silent storm of the quantum sea. Atlas, then, might not be wandering by chance. It could be riding the quantum tides, moving with an elegance that made gravity's grip seem incomplete. Others wondered about quantum entanglement, that strange phenomenon where particles separated by light years remain mysteriously connected. Could Atlas be part of a system of entangled instruments, scattered across the galaxy, silently linked? If so, it need not signal us. Its data, its observations, could already be flowing to another point in space, transmitted not by radio waves, but by the eerie threads of entanglement itself. Still more radical was the suggestion of exotic matter forms of mass that behave unlike anything in our laboratories. Negative mass, for instance, would accelerate in the opposite direction of force, a property that could explain the subtle deviations in Atlas's trajectory. Such matter remains speculative, but the anomalies it could solve made it a tempting thought. These ideas stretched the limits of both physics and imagination. Most scientists kept them at the periphery of discussion, knowing that extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. And yet, when faced with an object that refused to behave as expected, the human mind reached outward. Atlas was not just forcing astronomers to refine their data, it was forcing them to confront the possibility that the universe still held layers of law uncharted, that the foundations beneath relativity and quantum mechanics were still shifting. And in the quietest moments, when telescopes returned only silence, the boldest speculation whispered through the scientific imagination: what if Atlas itself was an experiment not ours, but someone else's? A test of whether the quantum fabric of the cosmos could carry a vessel, an observer, or a silent eye across the stars. As the debates swirled probability, trajectory, acceleration, silence, one thought lingered with increasing gravity. Perhaps Atlas was not simply passing by, perhaps it was watching. The suggestion was unnerving not because it was proven, but because it was possible. If Atlas were an artifact, a probe, or even a relic, then its role might not be to communicate, but to observe. This speculation drew humanity into a mirror. For what did we ourselves do when we sent Voyager outward? We placed golden records aboard, true, but we also embedded sensors, cameras, detectors' eyes to study the planets and stars along the way. Our machines, too, were not emissaries of dialogue, but instruments of study. They were observers first, ambassadors second. So what if Atlas was the same? A construct not designed to speak but to see. A traveler drifting silently past solar systems, scanning, measuring, learning. If that were true, then its arrival here was not arbitrary. It would mean that we were the subject of observation. Not just our star, not just our planets, but our civilization, fragile and luminous against the night. Philosophers asked what this would mean for the human story. For millennia, we had seen ourselves as the observers of the cosmos. Telescopes, satellites, detectors, all aimed outward. We were the ones who studied, who measured, who named. But if Atlas were watching us, then the gaze was reversed. We were no longer only the surveyors, we were also the surveyed. The idea was unsettling because it pierced our illusion of privacy. Earth, a small blue marble, had always seemed vast enough to conceal its secrets. Yet for an interstellar probe, secrets do not exist. Radio transmissions leak into space. Atmospheric composition is detectable from light years away. The signatures of industry and agriculture are written across our spectrum. We are already broadcasting our existence without consent, and if Atlas were watching, then it was reading the pages we did not mean to share. And yet, alongside the unease came a strange humility. To be studied is to be acknowledged. It means that in the endless black ocean, someone or something deemed us worthy of attention. Perhaps that attention was neutral, perhaps cold, perhaps even indifferent. But still, it was recognition. In that possibility lay a paradox. The thought that we might be under observation made us feel smaller, and yet, in another way, more significant. For if Atlas was studying us, then we were no longer invisible. We had entered the story of the universe, not as voyeurs, but as participants. From the moment whispers began that 3i, Atlas might not be a mere fragment. A tension spread across the scientific world. If it were deliberate, then what intelligence launched it, and why now? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Speculation quickly forked into two paths, fear and wonder. On one side, Atlas was imagined as a probe of caution, even of conquest. Civilizations, after all, send scouts before armies. Perhaps its silence was not indifference, but patience, a deliberate withholding until enough data had been gathered. Stephen Hawking's warnings about alien contact echoed loudly here. we should be wary of answering back. If Atlas were here to study us, then perhaps it was measuring the planet not for curiosity, but for opportunity. What resources we hold, what vulnerabilities we betray, what patterns of energy and behavior mark us as prey. On the other side, more hopeful voices suggested that such fear was projection. Humanity itself, scarred by centuries of conquest and rivalry, tends to imagine others in its own violent image. But what if Atlas was not a scout for aggression, but a gift of knowledge, a vessel sent to witness young civilizations, to archive their emergence, to seed connection across the stars? In this vision, Atlas was less predator than archivist, preserving the fleeting brilliance of worlds before time erased them. The question of timing made both interpretations weightier. Why now, when human technology had only just become capable of noticing such visitors? For billions of years we were blind. For centuries, our skies were watched by naked eyes. Only in the last decades had we built machines sensitive enough to catch faint interstellar glimmers. Was Atlas simply always there, and we are only now opening our eyes? Or was its arrival tuned to our awakening, a deliberate appearance when we were finally ready to notice? The speculation spread beyond astronomy into the wider imagination. Writers, philosophers, even political leaders considered the implications. If Atlas were deliberate, it was not only a scientific anomaly, but a civilizational event. Every possibility carried weight. That we were being studied as curiosity, as equal, as resource, or as danger. Each possibility reflected our deepest hopes and fears about what intelligence beyond Earth might be. And in that spreading debate, the object itself remained silent, indifferent or intentional, drifting as it always had. Its presence became a screen onto which humanity projected its anxieties and aspirations. Was it a scout or a sentinel, a relic or a warning? The truth was locked within its silence. The fear was simple, primal, that we are not alone, and that the gaze of another intelligence has already fallen upon us. The wonder was equally profound, that in the abyss of space, someone else thought us worth knowing. As Atlas drifted through the solar system, its mystery seeped far beyond observatories and scientific papers. It entered the language of philosophers, the reflections of poets, the speculations of futurists. For here was an object that seemed to reverse the ancient relationship between humankind and the cosmos. We had always been the watchers. Now we feared, or perhaps hoped, that we were the watched. This reversal carried profound philosophical weight. For centuries, the act of looking outward had defined civilization. Stone circles traced the sun's motion. Ancient temples aligned with the stars. Telescopes grew from brass tubes to orbiting giants. Each step was an expression of one truth, that humanity sought to measure, to know, to name. The universe was the object, and we were the subject. But if Atlas were a probe, then that polarity collapsed. The universe was no longer passive. It was returning the gaze. Some thinkers found in this the seeds of humility. If Atlas studied us, then humanity was not the pinnacle of observers but part of a broader ecology of attention. We were not sovereign minds peering outward, but creatures under the same scrutiny we imposed on microbes beneath our microscopes. To be studied was to be placed within a chain of watchers, a reminder that knowledge does not belong only to us. Others saw darker implications. Observation implies interest, and interest implies power. When humans study animals, they do so with motives, sometimes curiosity, sometimes control. If Atlas studied us, what motive lay behind it? Were we like ants being catalogued, or like resources being surveyed? The analogy was unsettling, for it forced us to see ourselves as objects of study, vulnerable to interpretations we could not control. Yet beyond fear or humility, there was wonder. If Atlas were truly a messenger of observation, then it might also be a bridge. To be observed is to be acknowledged. It means that somewhere, in the abyss of time and stars, intelligence has noticed us. That fact alone could reshape our philosophy of existence. We are not shouting into silence, we are part of a conversation, even if we do not yet understand the language. Futurists speculated that such encounters might shape our destiny. To be watched could spur us to maturity, just as the awareness of being seen by history has guided civilizations before. The thought that another intelligence might be judging our use of the planet, our wars, our art, our science, this thought was both terrifying and ennobling. It might force us to see ourselves as a single species under the cosmic lens, responsible not only to each other but to the gaze of the other. In that sense, Atlas was not just an interstellar object, it was a philosophical turning point. It made us wonder not only about the mechanics of its path, but about the meaning of being subjects instead of observers. In its silence, it raised the most unsettling question of all. What do we look like when we are the ones being studied? Among the voices summoned by Atlas's arrival, one name returned again and again: Albert Einstein. His theories had redrawn the cosmos, transforming space and time into a single fabric and gravity into a bending of that fabric's weave. Yet even Einstein's insights left margins where mystery lingered, and into those margins Atlas seemed to drift. Einstein had once shown that nothing could outrun the speed of light, that all objects, no matter how distant, obeyed the curvature of space-time. The orbit of Mercury, the bending of starlight during an eclipse, the collapse of stars into black holes, all had confirmed his equations. But anomalies like Atlas pressed against their edges. If it accelerated without visible cause, if its velocity seemed tuned with uncanny precision, then was it truly obeying relativity, or was it exploiting cracks where our understanding faltered? Some theorists drew upon Einstein's later musings, his dream of a unified field theory that would stitch gravity, electromagnetism, and quantum mechanics into a single frame. He had died without solving it, leaving the universe incomplete. Perhaps, they speculated, objects like Atlas hinted at physics beyond Einstein's reach, mechanisms of motion hidden in the deeper weave of space-time. Others noted the irony. Einstein had once resisted the idea of an expanding universe, calling his own cosmological constant a blunder, only for later generations to revive it as a symbol of dark energy. Might Atlas represent another such paradox? An object that seems impossible now, but, in hindsight, will demand a new constant, a new law, to explain. Philosophers invoked him not for mathematics alone, but for his humility before mystery. Einstein had written that the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious, that it is the source of true art and science. Atlas, silent and inscrutable, embodied that beauty. It was a mystery large enough to command awe, subtle enough to resist certainty. And yet, in Einstein's ghost, there was also caution, for relativity tells us that observation itself changes the frame of truth. To study Atlas is to entangle our perspective with its passage, to interpret through the lens of our limited instruments and human fears. Einstein would have reminded us that mystery must not be rushed into dogma, that the strange need not be alien, that the unexplained need not be deliberate. Still, the resonance was inescapable. Relativity had shown that space and time are not passive backdrops, but active participants in the cosmic drama. Atlas, drifting with its peculiar grace, seemed almost to embody that revelation. It was not just an object moving through space, it was space itself, revealing that it could still surprise us. Einstein's ghost lingered, then, not as an answer but as a reminder. The universe is stranger than our equations, and sometimes, in its strangeness, we glimpse not contradiction but invitation. If Einstein's ghost lingered at the edges of 3i, Atlas, then so too did the warnings of Stephen Hawking, whose voice, though silenced by time, still echoes through debates about alien contact. Hawking had urged caution. Civilizations that reach out into the cosmos may not always be benevolent. He likened any potential encounter to the meeting of Europeans and indigenous peoples, moments where advanced cultures brought devastation rather than enlightenment. To him, the silence of the universe was not absence but prudence, and humanity's eagerness to announce itself might one day prove fatal. Against the backdrop of Atlas, Hawking's caution became prophetic. Here was an object that bore the hallmarks of anomaly, defiance, perhaps even intent. It had not signaled us, had not announced its presence with a flare of communication. Instead, it moved with a quietness that mirrored Hawking's warning. If advanced civilizations exist, they may watch without speaking. Some philosophers argued that Atlas embodied a paradox Hawking had feared. If it was natural, then the universe is richer and more mysterious than our models, filled with interstellar fragments wandering unnoticed. But if it was artificial, then silence was more disturbing still. It meant that observation was occurring without contact, that we were already under the gaze of something older, patient, and possibly indifferent. Hawking had also speculated about the future of humanity, whether we could survive long enough to spread among the stars, or whether we would be extinguished by our own recklessness. Atlas, in this light, became a kind of omen. If it was a relic of another civilization, then it raised the possibility that they, too, had faced such trials. Did they survive and thrive, sending probes across the galaxy? Or did they vanish, leaving only their artifacts drifting like cosmic tombstones? To place Atlas beside Hawking's warnings was to feel both awe and dread. It reminded us that the greatest danger may not be being ignored by the cosmos, but being noticed by it. Silence, in this context, was not neutral, it was strategy. A strategy that humanity itself might one day adopt when our probes wander into alien skies. And yet, Hawking was also a man of wonder, someone who sought to understand black holes, time, and the beginning of the universe itself. He did not argue against curiosity. He argued against recklessness. In this spirit, Atlas became a test not only of our instruments, but of our wisdom. Could we study without projecting? Could we wonder without assuming? Could we confront mystery without letting fear or arrogance rule? As Atlas slipped silently across the sky, Hawking's warning returned like an echo from the stars. Be careful what you listen for, because one day something may listen back. The discovery of 3I, Atlas, sparked a global response unlike the fleeting interest of Borisov or even the uproar of Oumuamua. Observatories across continents entered into what could only be described as a scientific vigil. Night after night, telescopes turned toward a faint streak of light, each measurement a heartbeat in humanity's collective attempt to understand. In Chile, the Atacama Desert's airless heights gave clarity to its flickering brightness. In Hawaii, under volcanic skies, the Keck Observatory traced its spectrum. From Spain, South Africa, Australia, and the Canary Islands, other facilities joined the chorus. It was as if the planet itself, from hemisphere to hemisphere, had closed ranks around a single question. The Minor Planet Center coordinated the flood of data, compiling every observation into shared records, each line of numbers another glimpse of the object's secret. Even space-based eyes joined the vigil. Hubble strained its aging optics, teasing detail from a speck almost indistinguishable from the stars. The James Webb Space Telescope probed in the infrared, seeking warmth on its surface, the faint glow that might reveal composition. Together, Earth and orbit formed a network of attention, a lattice of vigilance stretched across the globe. The atmosphere of this vigil was not ordinary science. It carried a weight, a solemnity, as if the astronomers were priests at a temple, keeping watch over a silent God. Every anomaly recorded felt like scripture, every unexplained dip in brightness like a parable in need of interpretation. The hush in control rooms echoed not just concentration, but reverence. In academic journals, the tone was measured. Discussions of albedo, orbital fits, error margins, but in private, emails hummed with a different energy. Some dared to admit the feeling of awe, the sense that something unprecedented was happening, that the universe was whispering through this object. Others spoke more bluntly of dread, that we might be glimpsing the machinery of a civilization far older than our own. Yet for all the fear and wonder, there was unity. Rival observatories shared data freely. International borders dissolved beneath the urgency of mystery. Nations that rarely cooperated in politics found their scientists speaking the same language of numbers, equations, and sky maps. It was as though Atlas itself had drawn humanity into momentary alignment, compelling us to watch together. And so, as Atlas moved silently through our solar system, Earth's collective gaze followed. It was a vigil of science, yes, but also of something older, the primal instinct to gather around the unknown, to keep watch over what might be a sign. Even as data flowed in from telescopes and detectors, a quieter debate emerged within the scientific community. Were we truly seeing a pattern, or were we prisoners of our own minds? Human beings are creatures of recognition. We find faces in clouds, animals in constellations, stories in the randomness of stars. To some, 3I, Atlas was less a mystery of physics than a mirror reflecting our own tendency to project meaning onto coincidence. Skeptics warned that the sequence of Oumuamua, Borisov, and Atlas might only feel deliberate because we crave narrative. To us, 3 visitors in a decade seemed a chorus. But perhaps the reality was simpler. Our instruments had finally grown sharp enough to detect what had always been there. The cosmos had not changed, we had. We had widened our gaze, and in widening it, discovered what had been passing unseen for eons. Yet this explanation did not soothe everyone. The strangeness of Oumuamua's acceleration, the silence of Atlas's composition, the improbable timing each detail whispered against the comfort of randomness. Was it truly coincidence that the moment humanity learned to see, the universe offered not 1 but 3 enigmatic guests? Was it probability or choreography? Philosophers joined the conversation, framing the question in terms of perception. The danger, they argued, was that humanity might be weaving mythology out of statistics, interpreting natural visitors as deliberate signals. And yet, mythology is often the first draft of science. Lightning was once a god's anger before it became electricity. Disease was once a curse before it became biology. Could Atlas be in that liminal stage, our imaginations reaching ahead of our knowledge, mistaking mystery for intent? At the same time, neuroscientists reminded us of the human brain's hunger for patterns. The same wiring that lets us read language, anticipate danger, and trace constellations is also what tempts us to see design where there is none. Atlas might simply be a rock, but our minds had cast it as a messenger. And still, the object refused to resolve into comfort. For even if humans were guilty of projection, Atlas offered no ordinary canvas. Its silence was not blank. It was provocative. It behaved just anomalously enough to make skepticism uneasy, just familiarly enough to make belief uncertain. It lived in the narrow margin between chance and intention, a perfect mirror for our need to ask, are we alone? In this way, Atlas revealed not only the mysteries of the sky, but also the mysteries of ourselves. Whether stone or sail, fragment or probe, it forced us to confront the fragility of perception, the way we hunger for signals, the way we wrestle with silence, the way we bend the unknown into meaning. While debates about perception continued, engineers and mission planners began to ask a more pragmatic question: could we reach it? Interstellar visitors like 3I Atlas do not linger. They slip into the solar system quickly, curve around the sun, and vanish outward at speeds no existing spacecraft can match. By the time we notice them, they are already leaving. Yet the temptation to chase was irresistible. The concept was not new. After Oumuamua, proposals surfaced for a rapid response probe, a spacecraft held in readiness, capable of launching within months and intercepting such an object before it escaped. NASA studies outlined mission architectures using solar sails, nuclear propulsion, or staged gravitational slingshots around Jupiter. The European Space Agency conceived the Comet Interceptor, designed to wait in orbit and dart toward a target when called. But when Atlas appeared, these ideas were still in planning stages, not reality. Even so, the urgency sharpened. What if Atlas was the last such visitor humanity could study for decades? What if its anomalies could only be solved by instruments up-close mass spectrometers to taste its gases, cameras to map its surface, drills to touch its flesh? Observing from Earth gave fragments of truth. Intercepting it could give revelation. The thought of letting it pass untouched felt like negligence before history. Space agencies debated the timelines. A mission launched immediately might take years to catch it, if it could catch it at all. The required velocity was daunting, pushing the limits of chemical rockets. Concepts using solar orbit maneuvers diving close to the sun to gain slingshot speed were explored, though such trajectories demanded heat shields more durable than anything yet flown. Nuclear thermal propulsion promised more, but it was still theoretical. For now, the pursuit remained a dream, but one charged with meaning. Atlas symbolized the kind of opportunities that would come again, and soon. With the Vera Rubin Observatory about to catalogue the sky in unprecedented detail, astronomers predicted a flood of new interstellar detections. If missions could be designed now, humanity might be ready for the next arrival, ready to meet it in the dark, not merely watch it pass. The discussions carried a quiet urgency, almost desperation. To intercept one of these objects was not just science, it was contact. If Atlas was natural, it would reveal new chemistry, new histories of alien worlds. If it was artificial, the implications would shatter our solitude. In either case, the truth could not be gleaned from telescopes alone. It required approach, encounter, touch. And so, mission planners sharpened their pencils, sketched trajectories, dreamed of engines that did not yet exist. Atlas would likely escape untouched, but it had lit a fire. It had reminded us that the cosmos is not static, that opportunities for revelation race past us at thousands of kilometers per second. If we did not prepare now, we would always be too late. For every new image and calculation gathered about 3I Atlas, clarity seemed to slip further away. Each dataset was meant to narrow the possibilities, but instead the mystery only deepened. Its brightness fluctuated, but without a consistent rhythm. Its trajectory held steady, but with whispers of deviation that no model could comfortably contain. Every attempt to pin it down left scientists with fewer certainties than before. This was the paradox of Atlas. The closer it was studied, the less it resembled anything known. In the language of astronomy, anomalies are usually temporary. Apparent irregularities fade as more data arrives, as errors are corrected, as assumptions are adjusted. But Atlas refused that pattern. Instead, its mystery escalated with observation, as though the object thrived on scrutiny. Some scientists felt the object was deliberately elusive, though they would never phrase it so in papers. To them, Atlas resembled a puzzle that rearranged itself every time they drew near. A comet without a tail, an asteroid without stable brightness, a visitor without a clear origin. It was a collection of contradictions bound together in silence. For the public, This escalation was intoxicating. News outlets ran features framing Atlas as a possible probe, a messenger from another intelligence. Documentaries speculated on its nature, blending science with science fiction. For ordinary people, it became not just an object but a story, one that captured the eternal tension between fear and wonder. Within the halls of academia, however, the escalation felt heavier. Theories that had seemed promising weeks earlier fell apart. Exotic ice models failed to explain its lack of tail. Reflectivity data contradicted the assumption of a simple, rocky surface. Even the small hints of non-gravitational acceleration echoed Oumuamua too closely, daring scientists to acknowledge the possibility of intent. The more they studied, the less certain they became. It was as though Atlas had been designed to sit at the threshold of comprehension, neither fully ordinary nor fully alien, but balanced perfectly between the two. That balance made it unclassifiable, and in its refusal to be classified, it became almost theatrical. And so, the escalation of mystery did not end in resolution. It grew sharper, more unbearable, until astronomers were forced to confront the possibility that this was not a puzzle to be solved within the lifetime of its passage. Atlas would slip away, and with it, the answers. The truth, then, was not only in the data, but in the lingering silence it left behind. A silence that grew louder with every new observation, a silence that made humanity feel less like observers and more like characters in someone else's script. As 3I, Atlas drifted outward, its silence pressed upon humanity not only as a scientific puzzle but as a philosophical mirror. If it truly had come to study us, then the question shifted from what it was to what that meant. For to be the subject of observation is to be drawn into a hierarchy of watchers. Humans know this instinctively. We study microbes beneath microscopes, unaware or indifferent to their awareness of being observed. We track the migrations of whales and the pulses of stars, reducing them to data points. If Atlas was a probe, then perhaps we were no more than microbes to it, objects of interest, catalogued with precision but without intimacy. The thought was humbling, almost crushing. To imagine ourselves as ants beneath a gaze too vast to reciprocate was to confront the fragility of our pride. Yet another interpretation lingered. What if observation implied recognition? To watch is to acknowledge existence. The gaze itself, whether warm or cold, meant that in the immensity of the galaxy we were no longer invisible. That recognition could carry weight beyond science. It could reshape our self-understanding, binding us into a larger fabric of awareness that spanned across stars. Philosophers argued over these interpretations. Some saw in Atlas the beginnings of a Copernican reversal of consciousness. Just as Earth was dethroned from the center of the universe centuries ago, so too might humanity be dethroned from the role of sole observer. No longer the eyes of the cosmos, we might be but one set of eyes among many. Others saw danger in this thought. Observation, after all, is rarely neutral. When humans study animals, it is often to control, to exploit, or to predict. Could Atlas's silent study of Earth be the same, a prelude to deeper interference? Still, amid the unease, there was wonder. For if we were being observed, then we were part of a narrative larger than ourselves. Our wars, our art, our cities glowing in the night, these were not only human matters, but data in a ledger that reached beyond the solar system. We were part of someone else's story, even if only as a footnote. Atlas forced humanity to ask not just whether we were alone, but whether we were ready to be seen. Could a species fractured by conflict and distracted by trivialities endure the knowledge that it was no longer private, that its existence was under the gaze of another? Or could that very knowledge become a catalyst, forcing us to live differently, aware that our actions were witnessed, recorded, remembered beyond ourselves? In its quiet, Atlas offered no answers, but in its silence, it left humanity with the heaviest of questions. What does it mean to be watched when we have spent so long pretending that no one else was looking? By the time 3I, Atlas began to slip beyond the reach of our sharpest instruments, it had already rewritten more than data tables. It had carved itself into humanity's imagination, a quiet silhouette that blurred the line between stone and sail, between fragment and messenger. Scientists continued to parse its numbers, brightness curves, orbital fits, spectral guesses, but the object itself receded, growing fainter with each passing night. It was leaving us, as all interstellar visitors must, returning to the ocean of stars from which it had come. And yet, in leaving, it did not vanish. It lingered as presence, as question, as mirror. We did not know if it was natural or crafted, if it was a fragment of chaos or a tool of intention. What we did know was that its silence had forced us to confront truths we rarely dared to face, that our instruments are not yet sharp enough, that our models are not yet complete, that our place in the cosmos may not be as solitary as we once believed. In lecture halls, scientists framed Atlas as a challenge, a herald of discoveries yet to come, an incentive to build faster probes, sharper telescopes, more daring missions. In cafes and quiet rooms, philosophers and poets described it differently, as an omen, a teacher, a reminder that even the smallest speck of light can unsettle an entire species. And in the hearts of ordinary people who gazed at headlines and artists' renderings, Atlas became something stranger still, a story about the possibility of being seen. The object continued outward, unbothered by the weight of our interpretations. It did not turn, did not signal, did not reveal. It simply drifted as it always had, beyond the reach of our questions. But the change remained here, within us. To have noticed Atlas was to have been altered. To wonder if it studied us was to feel, perhaps for the first time in millennia, that we are not merely isolated minds in an indifferent void. We are participants in something larger, whether as subjects, partners, or simply fellow travelers. The vigil ended not with answers, but with silence. And in that silence lay the beginning of a new humility and a new awe. And now, as the last glimmers of Atlas fade beyond our vision, let the pace of thought soften, like dusk falling across a restless city. The numbers, the theories, the debates, they recede into the background, leaving only the quiet awareness that something passed this way, and we saw it. That is enough. Breathe slowly, and imagine the object drifting ever outward, a solitary ember carried on the dark tides between stars. It does not hurry, it does not answer. It only moves, as we too move, through a universe larger than fear and older than memory. Perhaps it was nothing more than a shard of stone, cold and indifferent. Perhaps it was more a relic of another intelligence, a silent observer tracing our fragile blue world as it slipped by. In either case, the meaning lies not in certainty but in wonder. For even in its silence, Atlas reminded us that we are not alone in the act of watching, that in the infinite night, eyes other than ours may open, and that in being seen, we are changed. So let the thought fade gently, like stars dimming at dawn. Let the questions remain unanswered, for they will wait with us, and let the mystery settle into stillness, not as dread, but as comfort. For in the vast silence of space, to wonder is to belong. The visitor is gone, the sky is quiet, and the story continues, carried now within us. Sweet dreams.